Sometimes a single event can feel like a flash of lightning, illuminating a really tense, complicated landscape. We just saw one of those flashes in the Caribbean Sea. 11 people are dead, and now the entire world is asking one very serious question.
Okay, let's just get right into it because this is the question on everyone's mind. Did the United States just, in effect, declare war on Venezuela? A single military strike has pushed tensions in the region right to the brink. So what in the world actually happened out there?
So, here are the hard facts as we know them. On September 2nd, a U.S. military strike hits and completely destroys a small boat in the Caribbean. 11 people on board were killed. And the U.S. administration didn't deny it. They quickly confirmed their forces were responsible. Which, of course, leads to the biggest question of all: why? So, how is the U.S. justifying this? Well, according to the official statement, this wasn't some random act of aggression. They're framing this as a very specific, targeted counter-drug operation. The official story is that this wasn't just a civilian boat. They claim it was operated by a really notorious Venezuelan gang, and that it was packed with a large shipment of illegal drugs. The U.S. even released a video of the strike itself. You can see a missile hit the vessel, followed by a huge explosion, and they named the target, a group called Tren de Aragua. And who is this group, Tren de Aragua, or TDA? Well, we're not talking about a small-time street gang here. This is a powerful transnational criminal organization. They're deep into drug trafficking, extortion, human smuggling, you name it. And believe me, they have been on the U.S. government's radar for a while now. Now, to really understand the U.S. argument, you have to rewind to February 20th of this year. That's the day the government officially designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization. And that FTO label, well, that's the absolute key to this whole thing. It was a game changer. It moved TDA from being just a criminal problem to being a national security threat. So when officials were pressed on their legal right to do this, they pointed to two things. First, that FTO designation we just talked about, which gives the government all sorts of new powers. And second, something called the 2001 Authorization for Use of Military Force, or the AUMF. Yep, that's the exact same authority passed right after the 9/11 attacks to go after terrorist groups. So, seems pretty straightforward, right? Case closed? Well, not exactly. Because almost immediately, legal experts, international bodies, they all started raising red flags. They're asking if this justification actually holds water. And this, my friends, is where the story gets really, really complicated. And this right here is the heart of the legal fight. On one side, the U.S. says its domestic laws, like the AUMF, give it the green light. But on the other side, critics are firing back, saying, hold on a minute, the AUMF was meant for groups connected to 9/11, not a Venezuelan gang. They also point to international law, like the UN Charter, which says military force is for self-defense, and maritime law, which calls for arresting smugglers, not blowing them up. Some legal scholars have put it pretty bluntly. They're basically arguing that even if that boat was loaded to the gills with drugs, that doesn't just magically turn it into a military target you can hit with a missile. By doing this, they say, the U.S. completely blurred the line between law enforcement and an act of war, and that could set an incredibly dangerous precedent. Okay, so to really get why this is all happening right now, we have to zoom out. We have to look at the bigger picture. Because this strike didn't just happen in a vacuum. It happened in one of the most geopolitically charged places on Earth. I mean, to really get a sense of the scale here, you have to go all the way back to 1989. That was the invasion of Panama, and it was the last time the U.S. had this many military assets packed into the Caribbean. We're talking destroyers, submarines, surveillance planes, the whole shebang. Now, the official reason is fighting drug trafficking, but a lot of people see this massive show of force as being aimed directly at one place: Caracas. It's no secret that, for years, the U.S. has been openly hostile toward Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his government. The stated U.S. goal has been regime change. And this has created this constant simmering standoff, with Venezuela calling it American imperialism and mobilizing its own military in response. And right underneath all this political tension lies a truly massive prize. And that prize is oil. A whole lot of it. We're talking about the Orinoco Belt, which holds the world's single largest proven oil reserves. People call it liquid gold, and you just can't ignore it as a massive factor in this whole equation. It raises the question of whether U.S. motivations are just about drugs, or if they're also about controlling these unbelievable energy resources. And of course, where you find this much oil and this much conflict, other global powers are never too far away.
Venezuela is definitely not standing alone in this face-off with the United States.
See, Venezuela has some very powerful friends. China is the #1 buyer of its oil and has invested billions in the country. And then there's Russia, a huge strategic partner and their main supplier of military equipment. What this means is that any move against Venezuela is also a direct message to both Beijing and Moscow. And these powers are not being quiet about it. China has already issued a direct warning to the U.S. about any potential invasion, calling it a flat-out violation of international law. With all its energy investments on the line, it's pretty clear that Beijing sees the American military buildup as a direct threat to its own interests.
Back in the neighborhood, so to speak, the reaction has been completely split. Venezuela's neighbor, Colombia, came out and condemned the strike, even calling it murder. They argued that suspects should be arrested, not killed. But then another neighbor, Trinidad and Tobago, praised the strike, calling it a necessary move against traffickers. And then you have groups like Human Rights Watch weighing in, warning this looks a lot like an extrajudicial execution, totally bypassing any legal process.
And all of this leaves us right here, with this one final critical question. The U.S. calls it a counter-narcotics mission. Its critics are calling it a military attack. It's a fundamental clash of definitions with literal life and death stakes. So as this story keeps developing, the real question is, in the fight against crime, where exactly is the line between policing and war? And was that line just crossed in the Caribbean Sea?